I think the most succinct description of my worldview was made by the American comedian Bill Hicks. And Bill Hicks does this monologue, which you can check on Facebook or YouTube, because it's very famous. And he's trying to juxtapose the silliness with the greatness. And he has a guy doing a news program. And he turns around and he said, breaking news, young man on acid discovers that matter is just energy slowed down to walking pace. And we are all one single consciousness experiencing itself subjectively. Now over to Bill for the weather. Very, very funny. And of course, that is true. You know, it's the idea that we are all one consciousness experiencing itself subjectively. The idea that if you were a singular consciousness, what would you do in order to make yourself not be bored? You'd create your own soap opera.
Exactly.
And you'd embody yourself in the soap opera, and you would become individuated consciousnesses, and you would forget that you're God.
And one thing to throw in here is, if you were all one consciousness at that fundamental level, then what is there to perceive? Nothing. This is nothing. You're the only thing down there. And so, but you're conscious though. And so you've got to be conscious of something. And so you automatically set up this self-referral dynamics where, you know, an observer, observed, and process of observation dynamics is set up. And so all of a sudden from one, you have three actually, or two, depending if you want to leave out the process of observation. But how can there be three? Because there's only one. And yet there's three, and there's one, and there's three, and there's one. So this infinite frequency gets set up, which creates this vast dynamism at the foundation of creation. And then from that dynamism, the whole thing arises, and greater complexification occurs, and we have the whole catastrophe, to quote George Zorba the Greek. Anyway, go ahead.
Because that's it, isn't it? You know, the idea that, and of course that indirectly answers your other question, because there was the very famous Bishop Berkeley, when Berkeley was going on about his idealism, and he argued that there is nothing other than the observer. And then the argument is, well, if I'm not in a wood and a tree falls, is there any sound? And of course there isn't, because sound is just vibrations in the air, which we interpret. So there's the answer to that. It's easy. But the idea is, you know, who is keeping that wave function working if I'm not there and there's no observers? Well, the counter argument is that the ultimate observer is God.
Yeah.
You know, the prima mobile, the first mover.
And who kept the show running in the universe for billions of years before there could possibly be biological life? Well,
correct. Now, and it gets then more interesting, because then it's the idea, well, you know, the observer is observing. And there's this very famous Roland Knox, who was a Catholic theologian, came up with this very wonderful poem. And I can't quote it, but it's the idea, you know, how does the tree continue to be in the quad when I'm not there? And that's the first verse, paraphrased. And the second verse is something along the lines, the tree continues to be because I'm always there as yours sincerely, God. So it's the idea of everything is thought. Everything is crystalline thought. It's the idea that thought is manifest in physical reactions.